The car had barely rolled to a stop at the red light when Kang Tae-jun's entire world tilted sideways. He wasn't even looking, not really. His mind was on the merger papers in his lap, on the meeting he had in 40 minutes with a French luxury group that wanted his money more than his company wanted their brand. Paris blurred past the tinted window the way cities always did when you were too rich to actually see them. Then he saw her, a woman in a cream coat, hair pulled back, walking with the kind of unhurried grace that used to make his chest ache when they were still married. He told himself it couldn't be her. Paris was full of tall, elegant black women in cream coats. It was a coincidence, nothing more. Then 2 small boys came sprinting across the sidewalk toward her, laughing, and she crouched down with her arms wide open, and she said their names, and one of those names hit him like a fist to the sternum. "Mommy!" Tae-jun stopped breathing. He hadn't seen Nia in 4 years. Not since the day she signed the divorce papers without shedding a single tear in front of him, stood up, smoothed her skirt, and told him he would understand, one day, exactly what he'd thrown away. He'd spent 4 years assuming she meant herself. He'd been wrong about so many things, but he wouldn't understand how wrong until this exact moment, watching a small boy turn his face toward the sun. The boy had his eyes, not eyes that resembled his. His eyes. The same sharp downward tilt at the corner, the same small dimple denting his left cheek when he smiled. Tae-jun's hand found the door handle before his brain had given permission. Then the second boy pulled off his cap to wipe sweat from his forehead, and behind his left ear, unmistakable, was a small, crescent-shaped birthmark. The exact birthmark Tae-jun had carried on his own skin since the day he was born. The car door opened. He didn't remember opening it. Nia. Her head came up. Their eyes met across 10 feet of Parisian sidewalk, and every ounce of warmth drained out of her face in an instant, like a light switching off. One of the twins looked between them, confused. "Mommy! Who is that man?" Nia didn't answer her son. She was still looking at Tae-jun, and in her eyes, he saw something that terrified him more than any board meeting, any hostile takeover, any collapse of stock price ever had. She looked at him like a stranger. Worse, like someone she had successfully, deliberately, permanently forgotten. To understand how a billionaire ended up standing frozen on a Paris sidewalk, staring at 2 sons he never knew existed, you have to go back 5 years, to a marriage that once meant everything. Nia Williams Kang had been Tae-jun's wife for 5 years by the time it all came apart. Their story hadn't started as a business arrangement or a family obligation. It had started as love, real and stubborn, the kind that made a man defy his own mother. Chairwoman Kang had never wanted her son marrying an American woman, and certainly not a black woman with no ties to Korean society, no dynasty behind her name, nothing to offer the family but herself. Tae-jun hadn't cared. He'd fought his mother across a dozen furious dinners, and on the day he married Nia, he'd looked her in the eyes in front of 300 guests and said words she would carry with her for the rest of her life. "I married you because I want you, Nia, not because of what you can give me." For a while, that promise had been enough to survive anything. Then the years passed, and no children came. It started small, a comment here, a sigh there. Then it became appointments, fertility specialists, blood panels, injections that left bruises on her arms she covered with long sleeves so Chairwoman Kang wouldn't have something new to comment on. Nia sat through negative test after negative test, each one a fresh wound, reopening the same place, and each time she told herself the next one would be different. Chairwoman Kang made sure she never forgot what was at stake. "A family like ours needs an heir," she said one evening at dinner, not even bothering to lower her voice for the staff clearing plates around them. "What exactly is the purpose of a wife?" who cannot continue the family line. Naya had looked to Tae-jun, waiting for him to say something, anything. In the early years, he would have. He would have set down his chopsticks and told his mother that Naya was his wife, and that was the end of the conversation. But this time, and more as the months went on, he said nothing. He looked down at his plate and let the silence sit there between them like a stone dropped in still water. His silence hurt more than his mother's cruelty ever could. That was around the time Han Seo-rin re-entered his life. Seo-rin had been his university friend, the daughter of a wealthy business family, and everything Chairwoman Kong had always wanted for her son. Korean, wealthy, connected. And, as the chairwoman liked to remind everyone within earshot, presumably capable of giving Tae-jun the heirs his family so desperately demanded. It started innocently. A business dinner here, a courtesy meeting there. Then the business dinners became private ones. The late nights at the office became nights he didn't come home at all. And when Naya asked where he'd been, his answers grew shorter, colder, more irritated, as if her asking were the offense and not his absence. Naya noticed everything. She wasn't a fool. But she kept hoping, the way people in love keep hoping long after hope has stopped making sense. That the man underneath all this coldness was still the same man who had once fought his own mother for her. Then one night, he left his phone on the kitchen table while he showered, and a message lit up the screen. "I hate watching you return home to a woman who can never give you a family." It was from Seo-rin. Nia stared at those words until they blurred. She didn't cry, not right away. She simply sat at the table with the phone in her hand until the screen went dark, and something inside her that had been holding on for years finally, quietly, let go. When she confronted him, he didn't deny it. He didn't even try. "The marriage has been dying for years, Nia," he said, like it was a fact of nature, like weather, like nothing either of them could have changed if they'd tried. Naya asked him one question, just one. "If I had given you a child, would you still have cheated?" Tae-jun opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again, and in the end, he said nothing at all. That silence told her everything she needed to know. What Naya didn't know, what nobody knew yet, was that 3 weeks earlier, desperate for one more answer, one more chance at hope, she had quietly visited a different fertility specialist for a second opinion, telling no one, not even her husband. The clinic called her back sooner than expected. The doctor's voice on the phone was urgent enough that Nia's stomach dropped, certain it was more bad news. She sat in the waiting room gripping the arms of her chair, bracing herself. The doctor walked in smiling. She was pregnant. Nia broke down in the exam room, tears streaming freely for the first time in years. Not tears of grief this time, but something she'd almost forgotten the shape of. After years of being called Barren behind her back, after years of being made to feel like a broken thing in a family that measured her worth by her womb, she was carrying a child. She decided not to tell Tae-jun right away. Their anniversary was only days off, and some part of her, some hopeful, foolish, loving part of her, wanted it to be a gift. She bought a beautiful wooden box. Inside it she placed the ultrasound photograph, a tiny pair of baby socks, and a card written in her own careful handwriting. "You always told me I was enough. Now our family is growing." She never got the chance to give it to him. Days before their anniversary, Tae-jun called her to his office. Nia walked in expecting business as usual and found Seo-rin already seated, and divorce papers laid out neatly on the table between them like a business proposal. "My family needs an heir," Tae-jun told her, not quite meeting her eyes. "I can't keep waiting." Then came the sentence that would live in Nia's memory for the rest of her life, the sentence that would replay in her mind at 3 in the morning for years afterward. I need a wife who can give me a family. Nia looked at the man who had once stood in front of 300 people and promised she was enough exactly as she was. She didn't cry in front of him. She refused to give him that. She didn't beg either. She simply asked, "Is she pregnant?" Seo-rin's hand drifted to her own stomach. She never said yes. She never said anything at all. But the gesture did the talking for her, and Tae-jun, desperate, humiliated, furious at his own failure to produce an heir, believed it completely. He believed Seo-rin might soon give him what Nia never could. Nia signed the papers without another word. On her way out, she paused at the door and looked back at him one last time. "One day, you will understand exactly what you threw away." Tae-jun assumed she meant herself. He had no idea she was talking about the 2 sons growing inside her at that very moment. That night, Nia went home to the apartment they'd shared and found the anniversary box sitting exactly where she'd hidden it, wrapped and waiting. For one long, terrible moment, she considered calling him, telling him everything, watching to see if the truth would change anything. Then she remembered Seo-rin's hand on her stomach. She remembered the papers on the table. She remembered his voice saying, "I need a wife who can give me a family," as if 5 years of marriage could be discarded like a defective product. She closed the box. Within the month, Nia left South Korea entirely, moving to Paris, where her older cousin had lived for years. A follow-up scan there delivered one final staggering surprise. Twins. 2 boys. Nia sat alone in the examination room and cried until the nurse gently asked if she needed someone to call. She thought briefly about reaching out to Tae-jun, about telling him he had not 1 child on the way, but 2. Then she opened her phone and saw the headline waiting for her, along with the photograph beneath it. Tae-jun and Seo-rin engaged. Chairwoman Kang standing beside them, beaming for the cameras, the same woman who had spent 5 years telling Nia she was worthless without a child, now glowing with pride beside the son who had replaced her. The family that had made Nia feel like a failure for half a decade had already moved on without her, as if she'd never been there at all. Nia made her decision in that moment, and she never wavered from it again. She would not go back. She would not beg the father of her children to choose them. And she would not let a man who had rejected her the moment he believed she was empty suddenly decide she had value now that she was carrying his sons. That night, alone in her new apartment, hand resting on her still flat stomach, she whispered a promise to the 2 lives growing inside her. "Your father chose the family he wanted. I will build ours." 4 years passed. To the outside world, Tae-jun's life looked untouched by consequence. He'd married Seo-rin in a wedding covered by every business magazine in Seoul. He had the company, the money, the connections his mother had always dreamed of for him. What the magazines didn't print was that his marriage to Seo-rin was miserable almost from the start. There were no children. The pregnancy she had implied on the day of his divorce from Nia had simply never existed. And whenever he brought it up, Seo-rin insisted, with practiced innocence, that he'd misunderstood her. Years of fertility treatments followed. Nothing worked. Doctor after doctor found nothing wrong with Seo-rin, which left only one direction left to look. Finally, after extensive testing of his own, a doctor sat Tae-jun down and delivered the words that would unravel everything he thought he understood about his own life. The fertility problem, in all likelihood, had never been Nia's at all. It had been him. His chances of fathering a child naturally were, the doctor explained gently, extremely low. Tae-jun sat in that office and felt the floor open beneath him. He thought of every negative pregnancy test Nia had cried over, alone in their bathroom. Every dinner where his mother had humiliated her, while he stared at his plate and said nothing. Every night he had chosen Seo-rin's company over his wife's, and the exact day, he had told Nia she couldn't give him a family, never once considering that the family might have been impossible to give because of him. For the first time in 4 years, Tae-jun understood that Nia may never have been the problem at all. But by then, she was gone. And he had no idea where. Until Paris. Until a red light and a cream coat, and 2 boys with his eyes and his birthmark running toward the only parent who had ever shown up for them. "Naya," he said again now, his voice cracking on the single syllable. She grabbed both boys' hands immediately, pulling them gently but firmly toward her. "We have to go." "Wait." Tae-jun stepped forward, and she stepped back, putting her body between him and the twins like a wall, going up brick by brick. "Who are they?" "Naya, who are these boys?" She said nothing. She simply turned and began walking. Fast, the twins hurrying to keep pace with her. But one of them, the curious one, the one who'd asked who the strange man was, glanced back over his small shoulder before they turned the corner. And Tae-jun, standing frozen on the sidewalk in his $3,000 suit, saw his own face looking back at him from a stranger's body, and something inside his chest cracked open that would never fully close again. He didn't go to his meeting that day. He canceled everything, sat in his hotel room, and used every resource his company's money could buy to find out the truth. It didn't take long. Private investigators pulled birth records, doctors' names, dates. The twins had been born almost exactly 9 months after the divorce, which meant, Tae-jun realized with a cold, sickening lurch in his stomach, that Naya had already been pregnant on the day he sat across from her with Seo-rin at his side, and told her he needed a wife who could give him a family. She had already been carrying that family, and he had thrown her out anyway. He went to her apartment 3 days later. She opened the door only wide enough to block the entrance with her body, arms crossed, face unreadable. "You don't get to disappear for 4 years and show up at my door making demands," she said, before he could even speak. "I need a DNA test," he said. "Naya, I need to know." "You already know," she said quietly. "You saw them. You know exactly what you're looking at. Then why won't you tell me the truth?" For the first time, something cracked in Nia's composure. Not tears, but a flash of anger so sharp it made him take a step back. She disappeared inside for a moment and returned holding the old wooden box, the one she'd bought for their anniversary 4 years ago. She thrust it into his hand so hard he nearly dropped it. "Open it," she said. Inside, the ultrasound photograph, the tiny baby socks, the card in her own handwriting. "You always told me I was enough. Now our family is growing." Tae-jun stared at the date scrawled in the corner of the ultrasound image, 3 days before the divorce. His hands began to shake so badly he had to sit down on the front step. "I was going to give it to you on our anniversary," Naya said, her voice steady even as her eyes glistened. "I had it all planned. I was going to surprise you." "Why didn't you tell me?" he whispered. "Why didn't you say something, Nia? Anything?" "Because," she said, and now her voice did break, just slightly, just enough to show him the cost of 4 years of holding this together alone. "Before I could tell you I was carrying your family, you told me you needed a wife who could give you one." Tae-jun sat on her front step and put his face in his hands, and for the first time in his adult life, he wept in front of another person. But grief, he would learn, was not the end of this story. It was only the beginning of a much longer reckoning. In the weeks that followed, regret curdled quickly into something uglier: entitlement. He began insisting, in increasingly forceful terms, that the boys were his sons too, that he had rights, that blood meant something the courts would recognize, even if Naya refused to. "Biologically, yes," Nia told him one evening, arms crossed on her doorstep, refusing again to let him pass the threshold. But you have never been their father. Not for one single day of their lives. I have lawyers, Nia. I have money. I have rights. Then take me to court, she said, and something in the flat certainty of her voice stopped him cold. This wasn't the woman who used to wait quietly at family dinners, hoping he would defend her. This was a woman who had built an entire life without him, a career, a home, a world where she didn't need his permission for anything. She was not afraid of him, and that terrified him more than any lawsuit ever could. The DNA test came back exactly as everyone already knew it would. Tae-jun was the father. He read the results alone in his hotel room and broke down completely, not from surprise, but from the crushing weight of everything the paper represented. 2 sons, 2 boys who had learned to walk without him, who had spoken their first words without him, who had celebrated birthdays and asked questions about their absent father without him anywhere in the room to answer. He asked Nia for access, not to her. He was careful this time to make that clear. To the children. She agreed, but only under conditions she laid out with the precision of a woman who had thought about this moment for years, half hoping it would never come, and half preparing for exactly this day. He would not take the boys to Korea without her explicit permission. He would not attempt to buy their affection with money or gifts. He would never, under any circumstances, bring his mother or Seo-rin anywhere near them. And most importantly of all, your relationship with them, she said, looking him dead in the eye, will never be used as a way back into my life. Do you understand me? I understand, he said. He agreed to every condition. But privately, quietly, in the part of himself he hadn't yet learned to be honest about, he still believed that if he proved himself worthy enough, patient enough, changed enough, Nia might eventually let him back in. The first meeting with his sons was excruciating in its awkwardness. The boys didn't call him Dad. They called him Mr. Kang, careful and distant, the way children address strangers their parents have warned them about. One of them, the curious one, studied him with open fascination. The other, more guarded, regarded him with open suspicion. Tae-jun brought gifts, expensive ones, the kind that would have delighted any child in Seoul society. The suspicious twin refused to even open his. Where were you before? The boy asked instead, his small face serious, in a way that broke something in Tae-jun far worse than any board meeting ever had. Tae-jun opened his mouth. He had no answer that a 4-year-old could understand, and no answer that wouldn't make him sound exactly as selfish and small as he had actually been. He said nothing. The silence stretched, and the boy's suspicion only deepened. Back in Seoul, Seo-rin discovered the photographs. Tae-jun crouched beside 2 small boys in a Paris park, unmistakably tender, unmistakably paternal. She understood immediately what it meant. If those boys were truly his, her marriage, already hollow, was finished. She didn't wait to find out how it would play out on its own. She leaked the story to the press herself. The headlines hit within days. Billionaire's secret heirs. Foreign wife hid twin sons for years. Reporters camped outside Nia's apartment. Comment sections filled with strangers calling her greedy, calling her calculating, accusing her of coming back to destroy a happy marriage for money she'd never once asked for. The truth was the opposite of every accusation. Nia hadn't returned to find Tae-jun. He had found her, by accident, at a red light in a city she'd chosen specifically because it was an ocean away from him. For the first time in his life, Tae-jun did something that cost him something real. He called a press conference. Standing in front of cameras that had once only photographed his triumphs, he admitted, in front of the entire country, that he had divorced Nia. that he had wrongly blamed her for their infertility when the fault, it turned out, had been his own all along, that she had never once demanded a cent from him. "She owes this family nothing," he said into the cameras, his voice steady despite everything shaking beneath the surface. "Everything that happened to her happened because of choices I made, not choices she made." It was, by any measure, a moment of real growth. Reporters would later call it the most human thing Kang Tae-jun had ever done in public. But growth, Nya would remind him more than once in the months that followed, does not automatically earn forgiveness. And it certainly doesn't earn reconciliation. Digging further into the collapse of his first marriage, Tae-jun uncovered something even uglier. Seo-rin had been in contact with an employee at the fertility clinic Nya had used years earlier, quietly influencing how her results were presented to the Kang family, encouraging the narrative that Nya, and only Nya, was the problem. And on the day of the divorce, her hand resting suggestively on her stomach had been exactly what it looked like. A lie, deliberately implied, never once corrected. When he confronted her, Seo-rin didn't even bother denying it. "You wanted an excuse to leave her," she said, cold and unbothered. "I only gave you one." The words landed, exactly the way she intended, cruel and precise. But even in his fury, Tae-jun understood she was right about one thing. He couldn't place all the blame on her manipulation. He had made the final choice himself. He had signed the papers. He had chosen her. Seo-rin had handed him a knife, but his had been the hand that used it. He filed for divorce from Seo-rin within the month. Chairwoman Kang arrived in Paris not long after, older and visibly humbled, asking to meet her grandsons for the first time. She apologized, actually apologized, for the first time in her life, to a daughter-in-law she had spent 5 years tormenting. Nya listened to the entire apology without interrupting. When it was finished, she asked one question. "If I had come back from Korea without children, would you be standing here apologizing to me right now?" Chairwoman Kang had no answer. "When I was only your son's wife," Nya continued, quiet and unshaken, "I had no value to you. Now I've given birth to 2 boys, and suddenly I'm family again. I don't need your acceptance anymore. I never should have needed it in the first place." She allowed the chairwoman a supervised visit with the twins, nothing more. Any deeper relationship, she made clear, would happen slowly, and only ever on Nya's terms. Months passed. Tae-jun, to his credit, didn't disappear the way he might have 5 years earlier. He showed up. He attended school events, sitting awkwardly in tiny plastic chairs meant for parents half his size. He learned, clumsily at first, to cook the simple meals the boys loved. When one of the twins spiked a fever in the middle of the night, Tae-jun sat up beside his bed until dawn, pressing cool cloths to his forehead, terrified in a way no boardroom crisis had ever made him. Slowly, the suspicion in his son's eyes began to soften. Then, one evening, as Tae-jun was tucking one of the twins into bed, the boy looked up at him sleepily and murmured, "Good night, Dad." Tae-jun sat frozen on the edge of the small bed for a long moment before he trusted his voice enough to answer. When he finally stepped out into the hallway, his eyes were wet, and Nya was standing in the doorway, watching. For one brief, dangerous moment, he thought he saw something soft cross her expression. Something that looked, just for an instant, like the woman who used to look at him like he'd hung the moon. He let himself believe, in that single unguarded second, that maybe, there was still a way back to her. He bought a ring not long after, told himself it wasn't to pressure her, told himself he was simply keeping it ready, for whenever, if ever, she might be ready to hear what he had to say. That day came on an ordinary evening, after both boys had finally fallen asleep and the apartment had gone quiet around them. Tae-jun sat across from Naya at her kitchen table, the same table where she'd once cried over negative pregnancy tests alone, though he didn't know that, and told her, voice shaking, that he still loved her. "I know I don't deserve you," he said. "I know that. But I will spend the rest of my life trying to make up for what I did." He reached for her hand across the table. "I want my family back." Nia didn't pull her hand away immediately. She simply looked at him for a long moment, quiet, considering, and Tae-jun felt hope rising in his chest like something physical. Then she spoke. "You have your family." He blinked, confused. "What?" "The boys are your family," she said gently. "You are their father. I will never stand between you and them, not for one day, not for one moment." But she withdrew her hand, slowly, deliberately. "I am not your wife." His face fell in a way he couldn't hide. "Is there any chance? Any possibility? Even years from now?" "No," Nia said. Not angrily, not with any trace of bitterness at all, which somehow made it worse. Calmly, certainly, finally. "I loved you when I had nothing to prove," she told him. "You stopped loving me the moment you believed I couldn't give you children. I will not spend the rest of my life wondering whether your love depends on what my body can give you. Not again. Not ever again." "I've changed," he said. Quieter now, all the fight gone out of him. "I know," Naya said simply. "I know you have." For a single heartbeat, that admission gave him hope again. Then she finished the thought. "But becoming a better man does not mean you're entitled to the woman you hurt." The words landed in the quiet kitchen like something final closing. "Have you forgiven me?" he asked, barely above a whisper. "Yes," she said. Hope flared in him one last time. "I forgave you," Naya continued, "because I didn't want to carry you inside me anymore, not because you're entitled to have me back." She looked at him steadily. "I'm genuinely glad the boys have a father now. I'm glad you love them. I want you at every birthday, every graduation, every football match, every important moment of their lives, for as long as you live." "But," he said, though he already knew. "But you'll stand beside me as their father," she said. "Not as my husband, not as my lover, not as the man I come home to. That part of my life is finished, Tae-jun. It's been finished for a long time. You just weren't there to see it happen." He finally understood, sitting at that small kitchen table with a ring still in his coat pocket, that this wasn't another obstacle to overcome, another test to pass. This wasn't a temporary punishment he could work his way out of with enough patience and enough time. Naya was truly, completely done. 2 years passed. The twins turned 6. Tae-jun had become, against every early doubt, a genuinely active father, flying between Seoul and Paris so often the flight attendants knew him by name, keeping a bedroom ready for the boys in both cities, never once missing a birthday. The boys called him Dad now, easily, without hesitation, as if the 4 lost years had simply been absorbed into the ordinary texture of a life that had grown to include him. His relationship with Nia settled into something peaceful, respectful, bounded. They spoke about the children, coordinated schedules, occasionally attended school events together, sometimes even shared a laugh over something one of the boys had said or done. But Naya never once gave him false hope, not even a flicker of it, no matter how much time passed. At one of the twins' school events, Tae-jun stood across the crowded room and watched her from a distance. She was laughing at something, genuinely, freely, the sound carrying across the noise of the room. Happy, unburdened. Another man stood beside her, saying something that made her laugh again. Tae-jun felt the old familiar sting of jealousy rise in his chest. And then, for the first time, he let it go without a fight. Because he finally understood, fully and without argument, that Nia's life belonged to Nia. It always had. He was the one who had once treated it like something he was entitled to control, and he would spend the rest of his life making sure he never made that mistake again, with her or with anyone. One of the twins spotted him across the room and came running. "Dad!" The second followed close behind. Tae-jun knelt down and caught both boys at once, one in each arm, and for a moment, kneeling there on the school gymnasium floor, he felt something close to peace. He had lost Nia. That loss would never stop being his to carry. But she had still allowed him to know his sons, still let him become the father he should have been from the very beginning. And he understood now that this alone, was more than he deserved. Later that night, as he tucked the boys into their beds, one of them looked up at him with the same unguarded curiosity his brother had once carried